And welcome to Monday. We're up to Chapter 9 in Finding Atticus. And before we begin, as always, I'll give vocabulary for those who are using this as a teaching tool. Some of the words that you'll hear in this chapter are unwittingly, which means to not do something on purpose. Complications, those are extra problems that make things worse in a situation. Meandered means to walk slowly without direction. Precaution, to take a safety measure to be safe. Intermittent, it means it happens once in a while. Pungent is an unpleasant, strong odor. So those are the vocabulary words to go with the chapter. Hi, Lori, I see you popping in. So we'll get right to the reading. And we have Chapter 9, Friday Night, Trouble in the Woods. As soon as Kyle left, Jamie skirted around the patrol car and hurried into the kennel to avoid talking to the sheriff's deputy. She was greeted by the echoing barks and yelps of the hungry dogs. Her adrenaline caused her to move as fast as if in a whirlwind. Busy. She had to stay busy and do the chores like she always did. Trixie, the toy poodle, bounced in her cage and scampered back and forth in front of the door. Her high-pitched yips hit each of Jamie's nerves like pinpricks. Princess, the old basset hound, stood at her door too, her long floppy ears nearly dragging on the floor. When Jamie started past Princess's pen, the dog protested. Woof! Her low barks seemed to surprise even her. Are you hungry, Princess? I guess by order of age, you get to eat first. Each dog had its own metal can containing a dry food that was purchased specifically for that dog. Jamie removed the lid from the aluminum can next to Princess's pen and took out her metal bowl. She filled it with 2 scoops of kibble, then placed the bowl on the stand just inside the enclosure. Princess buried her muzzle in the food and sniffed loudly before starting to crunch. Jamie worked her way down the aisle, feeding each dog in turn. In between each one, she scooted into the office to peer out the window at Charlotte and Tag Bentley. When all the dogs were eating, Jamie went back through and emptied, cleaned, and refilled their large water bowls. By the time she'd taken care of the last one, Charlotte and Tag had moved back to the sheriff's car where he was entering information into a laptop. Despite her best efforts to stay calm, Jamie's mind raced. She wished there was someone, anyone, she could turn to for help. When this all started, the plan seemed so simple. Hide Atticus for 2 days. He'd miss the plane. She'd bring him home. She'd have more time to convince Charlotte not to sell him. They'd all live happily ever after. She dropped onto the stool at the end of the aisle and buried her face in her hands. Ha! So she thought. Except for getting Atticus out to the cabin in the woods, nothing had gone as planned. Even though so far she hadn't outright lied to anyone, she was beginning to realize that what she wasn't saying was just as bad as a lie. If she didn't plan this right, when this was through, not a soul in the world would ever trust her again. What had driven her to do something so out of character? The answer was simple: love and fear. She loved Atticus so much that she was afraid to lose him. That much was simple to understand. If only Charlotte didn't need the money to keep the kennel open. Every bit of this horrible mess went back to that fact. Atticus wouldn't have to be sold if the financial situation wasn't so desperate. The engine of the patrol car roared to life. Jamie jumped from the stool and ran to the door. She cracked it open and pressed her ear to the small space. Thanks, Tag, she heard Charlotte call. The car engine whined as he put it into gear and backed away. Knowing that he was leaving relieved some of the tension in Jamie's muscles. The cell phone in her pocket vibrated against her legs, startling her. Her mom's photo showed up on the screen. She flipped the phone open. Hi, Mom. Hi, Jamie. How are you doing? Jamie moved away from the door and paced in the aisle. She didn't feel like small talk right now. She wanted to know what had happened between Charlotte and the sheriff. I'm okay. I just fed the dogs. She hesitated, trying to decide how much to tell her. Charlotte called the sheriff's department. Yeah, I know, her mom answered. I suggested she do it. Jamie couldn't believe what she'd just heard. Her own mother had unwittingly turned against her. What? Why? She needs to consider all of the possibilities, Jamie. We're all assuming Atticus got out of his pen and got lost. With this much time passing, that's becoming more unlikely. He could have been stolen. Stolen? Jamie's voice sounded strangled to her own ears. She paced even faster. Why would anyone steal him? You, of all people, know that his value jumped as soon as he won that show last weekend, Jamie. These are desperate times, and people will do desperate things. Jamie gulped. Her mother had no idea how close to the truth she was. Jamie was desperate, but she hadn't stolen Atticus. She just had him in hiding until she could convince Charlotte to reconsider selling him. Without his papers, he wouldn't be any good to anyone else. A pan rattled in the background of her mother's phone. Jamie realized she must be in the kitchen at home. You know that because you're thinking with a level head, her mother replied. If someone stole him, they might not have thought that through. Jamie stopped pacing. It was as if her mother had read her thoughts from just a few minutes before she called. So, did you need something, Mom? Just letting you know dinner will be ready at 6 o'clock. Okay. And, honey, invite Charlotte to come over, too. I will. Except for the sound of running water, there was silence again on the other end of the phone. Finally, her mother said, I'm really proud of how responsible you are, Jamie. I want you to know that. The compliment yanked on Jamie's heart. Her mother trusted her, as did Charlotte, and now she was throwing that trust away. Don't forget to invite Charlotte, her mother repeated. I won't. Bye. Bye, sweetheart. Jamie closed her phone. How many times in one day could she successfully fight back tears? How long could she hold out? And since Mike Williams was coming now, did it even matter? She couldn't keep Atticus in the cabin forever, and to add to the complications, now her grandfather seemed suspicious, which meant she needed to find another way into the woods and the cabin when it was light out. Her shoulders sagged with the weight of the problems that were springing up like weeds in a garden. Hey! Jamie nearly jumped out of her skin when Charlotte tapped her shoulder. She was sure her feet came off the floor as she spun around. Charlotte's eyebrows furrowed. Are you all right? You're awfully jumpy. I'm okay. I was just thinking about Mike Williams coming tomorrow. Do you know how long he's staying? Charlotte nodded. He has to be back in Chicago for a business meeting late Monday afternoon, so he has a flight out Monday at 7 a.m. Oh. It was the first bit of good news she'd heard all day. There was an end in sight after all. Pepper meandered up and down the aisle with his nose running along the metal chain link fence that defined each indoor cage. Through the little diamond openings in the individual kennel pens, he sniffed at the empty food bowls. When he came to Atticus's pen, his tail started to wag. He investigated all along the edges. His tail slowed until by the time he left the pen, it was drooping. The typical sparkle in his eyes was gone. We'll find him, Charlotte said as he sidled up to her. She patted his sleek side. But you have to get used to him being gone, buddy. For now, it's just going to be you, me, and the kennel visitors. Pepper pushed himself harder against Charlotte's thigh. Sadness enveloped the room like a thick fog. Maybe some dinner will cheer you up, Pepper. Jamie took the bowl from his pen. Pepper's ears perked up and his tail whipped the air. I thought something to eat might help you forget. Come on, Hoover, she said, comparing him to a vacuum cleaner. It's sad to see that your loyalty can be swayed with food. She scooped kibble into his bowl. With her head down, she thought it was a good time to question Charlotte. So, what did Sheriff Bentley say? He's writing up an incident report just as a precaution. Jamie glanced up as Charlotte pulled a hair tie from the messy knot at the back of her head and retwisted the hair. Charlotte looked so calm while Jamie's insides quivered. Is he going to investigate? Jamie hoped she sounded curious and not nervous. She put Pepper's bowl on his food stand and stepped back. The dog attacked the dinner with zeal. Pepper didn't like anyone around when he ate, so she moved out of his pen. I've given him all the information I have right now. How he handles it is up to him. He may have the investigators dust for fingerprints on the kennel. Charlotte replaced the hair tie and then tucked the extra strands of hair behind her ear. Normally, this wouldn't be a police matter, but because of Atticus's value, it changes the whole scenario. Yeah, I see. Jamie didn't know what else to say. All she could see was that, by the minute, she was getting deeper and deeper into this mess. Charlotte glanced at the other dogs, all curled up on their rugs, satisfied after their dinners. Thanks for taking care of the feeding. I just wanted to help. You have enough on your mind, Jamie said. I appreciate it. Oh, my mom told me to invite you to come over for dinner. Charlotte sucked her lower lip against her teeth while she thought about it. You know, I think I'll take her up on it. Do you want to ride with me? Jamie shook her head. Nah, I have my bike. I'll meet you there. Charlotte squeezed Jamie's shoulder. Thanks for all your help, kiddo. I'll finish here. You go along. What time is dinner? 6 o'clock. I'll be there. On the bike ride home, Jamie considered everything Charlotte had just told her. Now she had a new target date. Since Mike was leaving early Monday morning, she could bring Atticus back before school on that day. It would only be one day later than she had originally planned. She could pretend she was on her way to school and, surprise, when she went outside, there he would be, waiting next to the garage. The sheriff's report wouldn't be necessary, and she could try and convince Charlotte to change her mind about selling Atticus. In a perfect world, a perfect plan, that's exactly how it would happen. After dinner, her mother, Charlotte, Haley, and she went for a walk, hoping that Atticus would come trotting to greet them. Tag Bentley had called Charlotte once during dinner with another question. Then the evening dragged on as Jamie watched the clock, calculating her next opportunity to sneak out to the cabin. The sun had set by the time Charlotte finally left, and by then, Jamie could barely sit still. Atticus was probably wondering where she was. She was staring out the living room window toward the road, weighing her options, wondering how she could have handled things differently, when her mother came in and stepped up next to her. She draped an arm across Jamie's shoulder and squeezed, and they tipped their heads together. Haley's in bed. Want to watch a movie? Maybe Mamma Mia? That's always fun. Jamie loved the musical, and more than that, loved it when she and her mom got silly and danced along with the characters and parts of it. But the last thing she wanted right now was to waste more time. Thanks, Mom, but I really just want to crawl into bed. It's been a long day. Her mom squeezed her again. You're right, it has been. I'm sure tomorrow will be another day of searching if he hasn't turned up by then. Her mother pressed a long kiss to Jamie's cheek. Don't forget the wet down for the new fire truck starts at noon tomorrow. Uncle Craig would like us all there a little early. Jamie nodded. She'd been so wrapped up in the situation with Atticus that the dedication had slipped her mind. Her thoughts snapped over the events of the last week. It was hard to believe it was only 5 days ago when this had all begun. After months of missing her dad, Jamie's world was beginning to look bright again, but now she wasn't sure who to blame for the plummet back into darkness. Mike Williams for showing up at the show and badgering Charlotte to sell Atticus? Charlotte for agreeing to sell him? Or herself for concocting a plan full of mistakes and holes? When it came down to it, she was responsible for the current mess, and she couldn't deny it. Sure, it had all started on Sunday with the events of the dog show, but it was the decisions she'd made since then that had thrown her world and many other people's into chaos. As much as she wanted to blame someone else, she realized she had to accept it herself, and only she could make it right. Waiting for her mother to settle into her own room was worse than waiting for the dentist to come at her with Novocaine and a drill. It was actually painful to sit on her bed and wait, and worry. A slight breeze ruffled through her sheer curtains, flipping the edges in and out. Despite the war inside her, the rest of the world had settled into a peaceful night rhythm. She listened as her mother went through the ritual of preparing for bed. The faucet in the bathroom sink went on and off several times. The electric toothbrush whirred. The toilet flushed, the bathroom door opened, and her mother's bedroom door closed. The small television in her parents' room came on, and the distant murmur of news reporters' voices blended with the songs of the cicadas and night frogs outside. Cicadas, sorry. The moon was halfway up in the east by the time Jamie could sneak out of the house. She rode her bike to the end of her grandparents' driveway and then stopped in the road. She took in a deep breath and then let it out on a slow, painful sigh. There was still a light on in her grandfather's wood shop. She looked to the left toward the Jensen's house. If she went across the field behind their house, then she could cut back across and catch the pathway out behind her grandparents' barn. She glanced at the moon. The good thing was, it was providing light for her to see. The bad thing was, it was providing light for everyone else to see, too. Would she be visible going across the field? There was one other option, although it would take her longer. She could go over to the next road and enter the woods past the old scout camp. Given her grandfather's curiosity already, she decided it was better to not arouse any more suspicion. She hopped back on her bike and pedaled as fast as she could down the road. Even with the moon, she needed a wide-beam flashlight. She wasn't any more comfortable going into the dark woods tonight than she had been the night before, but at least now she had the confidence of experience to back her up. She'd done it once. She could do it a couple more nights. The narrow road leading into this side of the woods was easier to follow because it had been a well-worn driveway at one time. Once at the camp area, she circled the wide pond to get to the stream bed that led to the area near the cabin. The gulping of the frogs reminded her of the large timpani drums in the band. The low, resonant sound had a slight melodic echo that made Jamie's nerves quiver each time it filled the chilly night air. Combined with the rustling leaves on the trees, it gave the sense that the forest had taken on a life of its own. Her flashlight glinted off the silver of the beer cans tossed in the grass. Her bike tire rolled over one, and the crush of aluminum added to the eerie night noises. She found the stream bed and jumped off her bike, pushing it along the dry shale. She was on alert for any noise, any movement that might be a threat. Despite her best efforts to remain calm, her skin tingled and her heart pumped hard. When she was close to the area where she thought she needed to climb the slope to get to the cabin, she redirected the flashlight's beam. Atticus heard her before she saw the outline of the cabin at the top of the hill. First, his barks were intermittent. Then, when she called his name, they turned frenzied. Jamie felt the tension loosen in her muscles. It was comforting to know that she was no longer alone in the woods. "I'm coming, boy." She huffed as she struggled to push the bike up the incline. At the top, gasping for breath, she nearly collapsed. Walking up it was difficult enough. Pushing a bike turned it into a full-body workout. As soon as she had the lock off the door, Atticus pushed through. He bounced around her and then leaped over a nearby tree trunk to find a place to relieve himself. "I'm sorry I'm so late." Jamie felt foolish apologizing when he couldn't understand what she was saying, but at least it made her feel better. Atticus found his favorite trees and dashed from one to another. Like the night before, Jamie followed him with the beam of the flashlight. He started down the hill toward the stream bed. "Whoa, get back here, Atticus." She realized he was probably heading for the pond. "Not tonight. I'll take you back tomorrow." He stopped and stared at her, his head cocked. "Tomorrow," she repeated. "Come here, Atticus." He charged back up the hillside, nearly colliding with Jamie at the corner of the cabin. He followed her inside and went to his water bowl for a drink. Jamie directed the flashlight beam toward the shelf to locate the matches, and then she lit 2 of the jar candles for light. She scooped dry food into Atticus's other dish and then sat on the bench to wait for him to eat. Unlike his meal this morning, he devoured all of the kibble. He licked the bowl to get every crumb left, pushing it along the floor until he hit an uneven area and the bowl flipped over. When he lifted his head, he gave Jamie a look of pure satisfaction, then burped, loudly. Jamie burst out laughing. "If that's a thank you, then you're welcome." Atticus's lips rolled a bit as if he were trying to smile. His tail thumped against the whale. "Want to go outside, Addie?" He darted to the door and pranced in place. "I take it that's a yes." She took the flashlight from the bench and pushed the door open for him to go out first. His nose shot into the air and he sniffed loudly. He raced around the side of the cabin and stopped abruptly, tilting his head from side to side. Not expecting the sudden stop, Jamie nearly toppled over him. She righted herself and stood still, seeing if she could hear what had caught his attention. He was focused in the direction of the pond. The breeze carried spurts of laughter and loud talking. Jamie stroked Atticus's head to reassure him. "Probably some kids partying," Jamie said. "Maybe this time they'll be considerate enough to pick up their trash." Jamie snapped a piece of limb off a fallen branch and held the stick in the air. Atticus froze, his tongue hanging from the side of his mouth, his brown eyes focused on the stick. His tail moved first, and then the harder he wagged it, the more his back end swayed too. Jamie jerked the stick up, and Atticus lifted a paw, ready to race after it. His shoulders quivered with anticipation. "Here you go." Jamie lobbed it into the dark and shone the light into the trees so Atticus wouldn't crash. The dried stick splintered against a nearby tree trunk. Atticus picked up one piece, dropped it, and then lunged for another, trying to decide exactly what he should retrieve. Finally, he settled on the bigger piece and loped back, dropping it at Jamie's feet. "Good boy." She ruffled his ears, then picked up the stick and threw it again. With each exertion, his panting became more labored. "Okay, go easy on your full stomach," she suggested. "We don't need you to get sick. Let's go in and get you ready for bed." Atticus bounded ahead, rounding the corner in front of the cabin before her. He stopped abruptly and stiffened. His hackles, the line of hair on his back, shot up. Jamie recognized his perception of a threat. "Atticus," she said quietly as she crept toward him. "It's okay, boy. What do you see?" He tipped his head as he stared into the darkness. Jamie halted and turned her head to listen. The leaves on the ground rustled somewhere past the old fire pit. She swung the flashlight in the direction of the sound, but saw nothing. Atticus growled. The hair on the back of Jamie's neck stood up, and she shivered. What was out there? Her mouth felt like it was stuffed with cotton. Slowly, so as not to startle whatever it was, Jamie took a step toward the cabin door. She made another sweep with the flashlight, and that's when she saw it. The beam reflected off wary eyes that were fixed on her. The white stripe running along the animal's black body from the tip of the nose down to the end of the fluffed tail was unmistakable. She fought a groan. The skunk was after the dog food she discarded this afternoon. Without thinking, she tossed it in front of the cabin, and now it had attracted the scavenger. A low growl rumbled in Atticus's throat, and he took one step forward. "Stay," Jamie commanded in a low but firm voice. Atticus stretched his neck to its limit, his nose twitching furiously. The space between them and the cabin was only a few feet, but any sudden movement could startle the creature. Jamie glanced from the skunk to the cabin door and back to the skunk. Finally, she moved slowly, attempting to make her moves as smooth and non-threatening as possible. Even though she knew the animal's poor vision made it impossible for it to see her clearly, its hearing gave it radar precision for locating threats. And Jamie and Atticus were on the radar. It continued to stare at the bright light as its tail lifted like a kite in an autumn breeze. "Here, Atticus," Jamie said in a stage whisper. "Easy. Here." Atticus didn't move. His attention was fixed on his target. Then there was another noise. Even though the skunk hadn't moved, there was more rustling somewhere near it. Atticus's ears pricked up more. His head lowered, and he shifted the rest of his golden body into a defensive stance. Without moving his head, his eyes darted from side to side. As if he were walking in slow motion, he lifted one front foot and took a measured step forward, then another. "Atticus!" Jamie was afraid to raise her voice. Atticus didn't respond. Her knees knocked together, and she gulped down the saliva filling her mouth. There was more rustling. She flicked the light's beam to the direction where she heard it. 2 baby skunks, her kits, waddled from behind a tree toward the adult skunk. Atticus's head swung in that direction, then he crouched, preparing to spring. Afraid he would attack, Jamie grabbed for his collar, but he was too quick. He dodged her hand and leaped forward. That action triggered the dire chain of events that followed. In 3 long strides, Atticus was next to the kits. The mother stealthily swiveled and sprayed, hitting Atticus full in the face. The dog yelped and backed up, wiping his paws over his eyes. He sneezed and snorted, rolled and whined. The mother skunk and her kits toddled off into the night shadows. Jamie tucked the flashlight under her arm and cupped her hands over her nose and mouth to filter the offensive odor. There was no avoiding it. It seeped through every tiny crack in her skin. Gagging uncontrollably, she backed up, stumbling over the roots and branches behind her. Atticus continued rolling. The leaves crackled under his weight. He pushed his face into them in an attempt to remove the offending spray from his muzzle. When that didn't work, he jumped to his feet and rushed toward Jamie. She dropped her hands from her face and held them out in front of her to ward him off. "No!" she yelled. "No, Atticus, don't touch me!" But he was insistent. He pushed his face against her legs and rubbed. "Oh, oh!" She danced away from him, but he moved faster. The pungent smell made her stomach flip and roll until the gagging took her breath away. Finally, overwhelmed, she vomited. Her stomach heaved over and over as each acrid wave drifted toward her. She sank to her knees and held her stomach, tears streaming down her face. This felt like a nightmare, and she'd give anything to wake up right now. That's the end of chapter 9. So tomorrow at 1:30, no, I might not be on here at 1:30, so you'll have to watch my Facebook page. It might have to be a little later tomorrow. So thanks for joining us today. My questions for you, if you're a teacher or a student who's using this for your English language arts, what do you think are Jamie's options to try to fix this situation? I mean, she's in a pretty bad situation right now. Can you think of anything that she could do to fix it? How might she have handled things from the start? What would you have done differently, knowing now all the problems that she's run into? I mean, she's upset people. She now has Atticus skunked, which isn't fun at all. So think about those. Maybe discuss with somebody. Draw a picture if you want. I'm a big fan of drawing out what you're visualizing in your head. And until tomorrow, when we read chapter 10, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good afternoon. For those who are joining me for Attic Letters tonight, we're on as planned. See you at 8 o'clock. Bye.